People always ask me what my dad taught me about X, Y, and Z, but we never talked about race. He never came to any of the 159 races I ran. What happens when people fight over a name? When history, love, and loss meet in public, and the truth is buried under a wall of quiet. For years, Dale Earnhardt Jr. didn't talk about the hurt, rejection, and fights that went on behind the scenes of NASCAR's most famous family. Dale Earnhardt Jr. has finally spoken out about his father and stepmother, and it's a lot worse than we thought. There is no more quiet. This video shows the untold parts of Dale Jr.'s struggle to find his own identity, the mental scars his father's absence left, and his scary power struggle with his stepmother. Into the fire. Race car driver Dale Earnhardt Jr. didn't just show up one day. He had to live up to a reputation that was hotter than the engines on the track. The family name meant more than usual to him from the time he was born in 1974. Dale Earnhardt Sr., his dad, was more than just a driver. He was the intimidator, a huge figure in NASCAR history who made people both admire and fear him. There was more to the track than just racing cars. Legends were made there, and Dale Jr. was born with the sound of engines in his ears. But growing up with fast cars and fame was not the only thing that came with being the son of a star. It meant living in a huge shade where everyone could see your every move, and every mistake would seem bigger. The outside world expected greatness, but on the inside, things were harder. Things moved quickly, too fast a lot of the time, and the sound of engines drowned out the quiet caused by people not being there. His childhood was spent moving quickly and following rules. It wasn't always nice and free, though, like most kids' childhoods are. Racing put a lot of stress on the family, and their personal needs were often put aside. Dale Jr. learned quickly that he had to master the track if he wanted to stay alive in this hellish place, even if getting better meant giving up a simpler youth, the family that went by themselves. As a child, Dale Jr.'s life was broken by his parents' breakup, which most people would not understand. His mother, Brenda Jackson, worked very hard to give him a sense of security in the midst of all the chaos of fame and speed. She was a steadying force who tried to hold on to the routine that fast-paced life often broke. Because of how important his father was, Dale Jr. was pulled back into a world where family ties were mixed with business deals and public demands. Dale Sr. remarried Teresa Houston, and the Earnhardt family changed. While it used to be a home where everyone shared memories, it is now more of a well-run business focused on race success. It was hard to find the kindness, resilience, and the ability to do well under pressure. As a child, Dale Jr. had to learn how to drive, not only on the track, but also through the complicated territory of a family that was related by blood, but often felt far apart in spirit. Friended me, talked to me, or showed interest in me in any way. It was hard for me to stay away from that world, because every success was a small win over the thick silence. A silence that comes from having a father who was both a hero and a mystery. The cold engine of history. It wasn't just the races that made Dale Earnhardt Sr. famous. He was almost mythical, and just being around him made people respect him. Outsiders saw him as the scary one, fierce, unbending, and almost impossible to get close to. But behind that tough exterior was a man who didn't know how to show much feeling, especially around his own family. On the road, Dale Sr. was a charming force, but at home, he wasn't. Instead, he was far away and focused, and seemed to be protected against being harmed. If you ask Dale Jr., his father was a huge person. He saw him as a god among people who went 200 miles per hour. Though they were amazed, they were also scared and longed for something. He could only get his father's love if he was fast, skilled, and won. At the finish line, there were no soft hugs or warm words of encouragement. Instead, there was a measured nod, or, more often, quiet. "I'm proud of you," was a rare phrase that was said about as often as prizes were won. Dale Jr. struggled alone with a question that many famous children have thought about. Did his father really see him as a competitor, or was he just someone to fill the void? Dale Sr. spoke racing as his first language, and it was the only way he could get his love across. Every turn, every risk, and every hard-fought lap was a chance to talk. To win meant to get liked. When you fail, you have to face the cold truth that love and approval are not a given. This constant demand made a complicated bond that fueled Dale Jr.'s drive, but also chipped away at his emotional base. He looked up to his father with almost holy awe, but he grew up in an emotional wilderness where being open and vulnerable was seen as both a weakness and a strength, a prize that had to be won. They fought and lived together on the track, which was the only place Dale Jr. felt close to his father. However, it was also the crucible where love was tried, weighed, and limited. Dale Sr. was a man of discipline and distance when he wasn't racing. He could dominate racetracks, but found it hard to connect with people on a personal level. Up on Teresa's roof. Once Dale Jr. moved in with Teresa Earnhardt, family and loyalty rules changed in a way that was quite new. For as long as Dale Earnhardt was behind the wheel, Teresa wasn't the typical mom you might think of. She didn't rule in a mean or cold way out of disrespect. But she wasn't a source of comfort or warmth either. She instead approached the Earnhardt family tradition with the care and strategic thinking of a seasoned business leader in charge of a high-stakes operation. She ran DEI, the Earnhardt racing empire, with great business sense and a focus on keeping the family name alive. Control and order were more important than feelings. Everything in Teresa's world had to match the grandeur and importance of the Earnhardt name. In this case for Dale Jr., it meant a partnership that was practical, even transactional. When they talked to each other, it was more about negotiating than nurturing, and about professional limits than close family ties. Dale Jr. never called her mom. The title was strange, and Teresa never asked for or took on that job. There were no bedtime stories, sweet whispers of comfort in the dark, or other simple acts of comfort that a child might want. In its place, there were expectations, high ones that wouldn't change. That meant he had to follow the rules set by his father and now strictly applied by Teresa. In that family, Earnhardt's impact was like shiny chrome. It shone brightly in the light and couldn't be touched. But it was cold and hard to bend below that shiny surface. The joy of family life was given up for the sake of success and honor. Love was judged by how well someone performed and how closely they stuck to a carefully controlled public image. The house wasn't a safe place for Dale Jr. It was a place to test himself. His emotional needs were often put aside so that his reputation could be kept up. Even so, this place helped a young man become strong and determined. Teresa's strict rule may have made him less soft, but it also made him less determined. With a complicated family life in the background, Dale Jr. learned to make his own way one lap at a time, racing not only against other people, but also against the standards and ghosts of those who came before him. A view of what you know. Dale Jr. had lived for years under the shade of a man who was bigger than life. His father was a man who could command respect just by being there and the sound of engines. As a child, Dale Sr. often thought about the track, the race, and the next big win. Even though they shared blood and a name, the boy often felt like he wasn't seen because of all the demands. But when Dale Jr. won his first race, everything changed. He was only 17 years old, and he was still learning how to talk about racing in a mean way. It looked like the world stopped when the flag flew over him. Even more important, his father's eyes did too. Dale Sr. didn't look at his son with the blank look of a parent in charge of a child, but with the sharp, measured respect of a seasoned fighter who sees a good opponent or maybe a successor. He seemed to finally see me, but not as his son or his family. Dale Jr. would remember later that he saw me as a driver. The memory made me feel both proud and sad at the same time. It was like they were saying, "You belong here, but the bar is still set high because of the way they looked at you." But this confirmation was not strong. It wasn't wrapped in warm hugs or words of support. It was bought and sold with wins, loses, lapses, and races that were over. Even though the rare recognition was exciting, It made the quiet gap between father and son even bigger when the engines stopped. As much as Dale Jr. wanted praise for his work, he also wanted more. It was the kind of praise that he could never earn in a competition-hardy setting. When they got off the track, the quiet stayed thick, heavy, and constant. The crowd's roar died down, but the sound of unmet emotional needs stayed. That brief moment of understanding was both a big step forward and a warning. Earnhardt's world saw love as winning, and anything less than that was seen as failing. The day there was no more noise. On February 18, 2001, the 18th began like any other day in the world of racing, full of hope, thrills, and the usual chaos of tires screeching and motors revving up. This wasn't just a race, it was more than that. History was made, and stories were told on that stage, but no one was ready for what that day would bring. When Dale Sr. fell on the last lap, millions of fans held their breath, and then it all broke. The unthinkable had taken place. The race car driver, who had shaped a generation, was dead, right there on the track that had been his kingdom. For Dale Jr., it was more than just a story. It was an unbearable break, a quake in the foundations of his world. It was very clear after that last race, which broke my heart. Not only was Dale Sr. fighting, he was also keeping everyone safe. It was the last lap, and he stayed back to stop the charging field. This let Michael Waltrip and Dale Jr., who were both driving for Dale Earnhardt Incorporated, get away. The father did something kind for his child he showed his love for his son in the only way he knew how, by making way for him. But the Earnhardt family's sadness was quiet. There was a wound that wouldn't heal under every win and every press conference, though. It was an absence that rang louder than any engine. Even though there was no longer any noise, the quiet was very loud. It wasn't just the end of a life. It marked the end of a part of Dale Jr.'s life and left him to find his way through a road where loss and legacy were intertwined in a complicated, unspoken way. The fight over what to call it. As time went on, the cracks between Dale Jr. and DEI, Dale Earnhardt Incorporated, got bigger until they were clear splits. What started out as a shared tradition based on his father's famous career turned into a battleground for power, inheritance, and identity over time. Dale Jr. wasn't just looking for a symbolic part or a place to sit for a ceremony. He wanted to have a real say in the kingdom that was based on his bloodline and his name. The business was run with a cold and iron will, though, by Teresa Earnhardt, CEO of DEI and wife of Dale Sr. She stuck to every choice, every asset, and every part of the Earnhardt brand. In spite of everything he had done and given, Dale Jr. was locked out of the machine his father had built. It's important for me, as an expert, to remember all the things that a driver does and thinks about. A machine that worked without him. The conflict got too much to handle. The Earnhardt name was on the store, the building, and the race cars. But the son with that name was no longer welcome at the meeting table or behind the wheel. Even though Dale Sr. had planned to leave DEI to his children, Teresa did not want to give Dale Jr. and his sister Kelly a big stake in the business their father had built. Max Siegel was hired as head of global operations for DEI by her in 2006. Later, Chip Gin Racing bought them and changed their name to Earnhardt Ganassi Racing. But things were getting bad in their relationship a long time before this happened. In fact, the stress had been building up since December 2003. In an episode that showed a lot, the Dale Jr. remembered a time when things started to go wrong. He hadn't been paid in 3 months. He talked to team boss, Ty Norris, about it, but was told to talk to Teresa first and keep things friendly. The talk quickly got out of hand. Norris remembered that Dale Jr. yelled, "You haven't paid me. You've broken my contract." It turned bad. That was all you had to say. You didn't want to stay any longer. In 2008, Dale Jr. did leave DEI.